Clara Whitmore pressed her mother's Bible against her chest and stepped off the stagecoach into a town that didn't want her. Snow fell hard on Willow Creek, Wyoming, and the man waiting by the post, tall, bearded, silent, looked at her like she was a bill come due. She was 19. He was a widower with 2 children who'd buried their mother 8 months ago. And somewhere in that frozen valley, a little boy was about to say words that would shatter everything she thought she knew about survival. If this story touches your heart, subscribe and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach driver didn't help her down. Clara Whitmore gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white against the cold, and lowered herself onto the frozen ground of Willow Creek, Wyoming. Snow swirled thick around her, catching in her eyelashes, melting against her cheeks, like tears she refused to shed. Her carpetbag hit the ground beside her. Everything she owned in the world fit inside that bag: 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, a photograph of parents she'd never see again, and 17 cents. 17 cents wouldn't buy her a meal, wouldn't buy her passage back to Missouri, wouldn't buy her a single thing except maybe a prayer, and Clara had stopped believing those worked a long time ago. She spotted him immediately. Jacob McAllister stood near the general store, hat in his hands, beard dusted with snow. He was taller than she'd imagined from his letters. 3 letters total, each one shorter than the last, each one more businesslike. He needed a wife. She needed a home. The arrangement made sense on paper. Nothing about this moment made sense. Clara straightened her spine and walked toward him, her boots crunching through the snow. She could feel eyes on her from the store windows, from the saloon across the street, from the church steeple, where someone had paused their bell ringing to watch the spectacle. The mail-order bride had arrived. "Mr. McAllister," she said when she reached him. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was rougher than gravel, deeper than she'd expected. His eyes gray as storm clouds moved over her face, once then away. "You're younger than I thought." "I'm 19. I know how old you are. Just thought you'd look—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Never mind. Wagon's this way." He turned and walked toward a buckboard parked near the livery stable. Clara followed, her carpetbag banging against her leg with every step. That's when she saw them. 2 children sat in the wagon bed, bundled in wool blankets. The boy was maybe 11, with his father's dark hair and a jaw set so tight it could have been carved from stone. The girl was younger, 6 perhaps, with braids the color of autumn wheat and eyes that held more sorrow than any child's eyes should. Clara stopped walking. The boy stared at her. Not with curiosity, not with hope, with something that looked terrifyingly close to hatred. "Emma," Jacob said, lifting Clara's carpetbag into the wagon without asking permission. "This is Miss Whitmore. She'll be staying with us." "For how long?" The boy's voice cracked on the question. "Long as she wants, I reckon." "Mama's only been gone 8 months." Jacob's hand froze on the wagon rail. Clara watched something pass across his face, grief, guilt, exhaustion, before he smoothed it away. "Your mama's got nothing to do with this," Jacob said quietly. "Miss Whitmore's here to help. That's all. That's all." Sam's laugh was bitter, too old for his years. "You think I'm stupid, Pa? I know what a mail-order bride is. I heard the men talking at church." "Samuel, she's here to replace Mama, to sleep in Mama's bed, to wear Mama's apron and pretend like she belongs here." The boy's voice rose, cracking again. "But she don't belong here. She ain't never gonna belong here." The little girl, Emma, pressed herself deeper into the blankets, her eyes fixed on Clara with something that might have been fear. Clara's chest tightened. She'd prepared herself for awkwardness, for distance, for the slow, painful work of earning trust. But she hadn't prepared for this, a child's grief weaponized into words that cut like broken glass. "I understand," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "I understand you're hurting." "You don't understand nothing." Sam jumped down from the wagon, his boots hitting the snow hard. "You ain't from here. You don't know us. You don't know what Mama was like, how she sang when she was making bread, how she smelled like lavender and honey, how she'd tell us stories every night before bed." His voice broke completely. "You're just some stranger Pa bought with his cattle money because he can't take care of us himself." "Sam, that's enough." Jacob's voice was sharp now, a warning. "It ain't enough. It ain't never gonna be enough." The boy turned and ran not toward home, but toward the town, disappearing between the general store and the blacksmith shop. Jacob swore under his breath. "I'll go after him," Clara said. "No." Jacob's hand closed around her arm, stopping her. His grip was firm, but not rough. "He don't know you. He'll just run further." "Then what do? We wait." Jacob released her arm, his jaw tight. "He'll come back when he's ready. Always does." Clara looked toward where Sam had vanished, then back at the wagon where Emma sat alone, her small body trembling beneath the blankets. "Is she cold?" Clara asked. "Emma don't talk much. Not since Margaret passed." Margaret, his wife's name. Clara filed it away, adding it to the small collection of facts she'd gathered from his letters. Margaret McAllister, dead at 31, taken by childbirth complications. The baby hadn't survived either. Clara climbed into the wagon bed, settling herself beside Emma. The little girl flinched but didn't move away. "Hello, Emma," Clara said softly. "That's a pretty name. My mama's name was Emma, too." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "She used to make the best apple pie in all of Missouri. Taught me the recipe before she passed." Clara pulled the blanket tighter around both of them, sharing her warmth with the child. "Maybe someday, if you want, I could teach you." Emma said nothing, but she didn't move away either. Jacob climbed onto the driver's bench, gathering the reins. He glanced back at Clara, once his expression unreadable. "Ranch is 3 miles out," he said. "Road's rough in this weather. Hold on." The wagon lurched forward, and Clara held on to the rail to the blanket, to the small hope that somewhere in this frozen valley there might be a place for her after all. The McAllister Ranch appeared through the snow like a ghost rising from the earth. 2 stories of weathered timber, a wraparound porch sagging on one side, a barn that had seen better decades. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant someone had kept the fire going, but the whole place had an air of neglect, of a household running on survival rather than living. A man emerged from the barn as the wagon approached. He was older, 60, maybe more, with dark skin, weathered by decades of sun and wind, and a posture that spoke of hard work and quiet dignity. "That's Zeke," Jacob said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "Been with my family since before I was born. He'll help you with your things." Zeke approached the wagon, his eyes taking in Clara with a look that was neither welcoming nor hostile, just careful, assessing. "Miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Clara Whitmore." She extended her hand. Zeke looked at her hand for a moment longer than was comfortable, then took it. His grip was firm. "Zeke Johnson, I keep this place running while Mr. McAllister keeps it standing." "That's a generous description," Jacob muttered, climbing down from the wagon. "Emma, come on. Let's get you inside where it's warm." Emma scrambled toward her father, her arms reaching up. Jacob lifted her easily, settling her against his chest. For a moment, his hard expression softened into something that looked almost like tenderness. Then it was gone. "Miss Whitmore, the house is through there. Second door on the right upstairs will be your room. Supper's at 6 if you're hungry." He paused. "Zeke, when Sam comes back." "I'll keep an eye out," Zeke said. Jacob nodded once, then carried Emma toward the house without looking back. Clara stood in the snow watching him go. Her carpet bag sat in the wagon bed waiting. Everything waited. "He ain't a bad man." She turned. Zeke was still there watching her with those careful eyes. "Mr. McAllister?" Clara asked. "Jacob, he ain't a bad man, just a broken one." Zeke lifted her carpet bag from the wagon and handed it to her. Lost his wife, lost his baby, almost lost this ranch last winter when the cattle froze. Man can only take so much before he forgets how to feel anything at all. Clara hugged the bag against her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because that boy Sam, he ain't wrong about everything. Zeke's voice dropped. You are here to replace something, or someone, and that's a heavy burden for anybody to carry, especially someone young as you. I'm not trying to replace anyone. Don't matter what you're trying to do, miss. Matters what they think you're doing. Zeke stepped back, his boots crunching in the snow. You want to survive here? Don't fight the ghost. Learn to live with her. He turned and walked back toward the barn, leaving Clara alone in the falling snow. The house was cold. Not just temperature cold, though the fire had burned low and the wind crept through gaps in the window frames, but emotionally cold, hollow, like a body that had lost its soul. Clara found the kitchen first. Dishes piled in a basin. Dried mud tracked across the floor. A pot of something unidentifiable crusted on the stove. Her aunt had warned her about this, about homes that fell apart after a woman's death, but seeing it was different than hearing about it. It ain't been like this always. Clara spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, late 40s, with silver-streaked hair and a face that looked like it had laughed a lot once. She wore a practical dress beneath a wool coat, and she carried a covered basket. Ruth Ellen Caldwell, the woman said, stepping into the kitchen. I run the general store in town. Saw you arrive and thought you might need a friendly face. You thought right, Clara exhaled. I'm Clara Whitmore. I know who you are, honey. Whole town knows. Been the main topic of gossip since Jacob sent that advertisement to the Eastern papers. Ruth set the basket on the table, pulling back the cloth to reveal fresh bread, a jar of preserves, and a bundle of dried herbs. Brought you some supplies. The ones in Jacob's pantry are likely growing things by now. Clara almost smiled. Almost. That's very kind of you. It ain't kindness. It's practicality. You're gonna need allies here, and I'd rather you think of me as one. Ruth's eyes swept the kitchen, taking in the mess. Lord have mercy. Margaret would spin in her grave if she saw this. You knew her, Mrs. McAllister. Knew her. Ruth laughed, but it was sad. Honey, Margaret was my best friend for 15 years. Watched her marry Jacob. Watched her birth both those babies. Held her hand when she stopped shaking her head. Well, some things don't need repeating. Clara's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Death comes for all of us. Margaret knew that better than most. Ruth began unpacking the basket-setting items on the table with efficient movements. What you need to know is that this family ain't recovered. Sam blames his father for not being home when Margaret went into labor. Emma stopped talking the day they buried her mama. And Jacob blames himself for everything. He wasn't home. Cattle had broken through the fence. He was 3 hours out when the bleeding started. By the time he got back, Ruth's voice faltered. By the time he got back, it was over. Both of them. Margaret and the baby. Clara sank into a chair, the weight of this family's grief pressing down on her like a physical thing. And now I'm here, she said quietly. A stranger they didn't ask for. You're here because Jacob wrote a letter asking for help. That took more courage than you know. Man like him, with his pride admitting he couldn't do it alone, was harder than anything else he's faced. Ruth sat across from Clara, her weathered hands folded on the table. But I won't lie to you, honey. This won't be easy. Sam's determined to hate you. Emma's locked up tighter than a bank vault. And Jacob don't know how to love anybody anymore. Not even himself. Then why did he send for me? Because somewhere deep down he remembers what it felt like to have someone to come home to. Ruth reached across the table, covering Clara's hand with her own. And because those children need a mother, whether they know it or not. The front door slammed. Clara jumped. Ruth's head turned toward the sound. Heavy footsteps moved through the hallway, and then Sam appeared in the kitchen doorway. Snow crusted his hair. His cheeks were red from cold, his eyes red from something else crying, though he'd clearly tried to hide it. He saw Ruth first. His expression softened for a fraction of a second. Then he saw Clara. The softness vanished. "You're in Mama's chair," he said. Clara looked down. The chair she'd chosen was worn smooth in certain spots, molded by years of use. Of course, it was Margaret's chair. Of course. "I'm sorry," Clara said, starting to rise. "I didn't. Don't matter." Sam's voice was flat. "You're here now, sitting in her chair, sleeping in her house, eating off her plates. That's how it works, right? You just take over." "Sam." Ruth's voice was gentle, but firm. "That ain't fair, and you know it. What ain't fair is Pa bringing some stranger here before Mama's grave even had time to settle." Sam's hands curled into fists at his sides. "What ain't fair is having to watch someone else walk around like she belongs here when she don't. When she never will." "I'm not trying to take anyone's place," Clara said. "Then why are you here?" The question hung in the air, sharp and raw. Clara stood slowly. She met Sam's eyes, this boy, who was too young to carry so much pain, too angry to let anyone help him carry it. "Because I've got nowhere else to go," she said honestly. "My mama died last spring. My papa died in the war before I was old enough to remember his face. I've been living with relatives who made it clear I wasn't wanted." She paused, her voice steady. "So when your father's letter came when someone offered me a place, even if it was hard, even if it wasn't love, I took it. Because sometimes survival is all you've got." Sam stared at her. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Recognition maybe of a grief that matched his own. Then it was gone. "Survival ain't the same as belonging," he said. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Ruth sighed. "Well, that went better than I expected." Clara's legs felt weak. She sank back into the chair, Margaret's chair, and pressed her hands against her face. "He's not wrong," she whispered. "I don't belong here." "Not yet." Ruth's voice was kind. "But belonging ain't something you find, honey. It's something you build, and you've got time, if you're willing to do the work." Clara lowered her hands. Through the window she could see the snow falling harder now, blanketing the ranch in white. Somewhere in this house, a little girl sat silent with her grief. Somewhere a boy nursed his anger, like a wound he wouldn't let heal. And somewhere, a man who'd forgotten how to feel was wondering if he'd made the worst mistake of his life. "I'm willing," Clara said. Ruth smiled, small, sad, but real. "Then that's where we start." Supper that night was a disaster. Clara had spent the afternoon scrubbing the kitchen, organizing the pantry, and preparing a meal from Ruth's supplies, and what little she could salvage from Jacob's stores. The bread was fresh, the stew was thick, the table was set with dishes she'd found in a cabinet. Margaret's dishes, she was certain, but there was no avoiding that now. Jacob came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots. He paused at the threshold, his eyes sweeping the kitchen, the clean floors, the organized counters, the food steaming on the table. Something shifted in his expression. Clara couldn't read it. "Smells good," he said finally. "Thank you." He sat at the head of the table. Clara took the seat furthest from Margaret's chair, leaving it empty. A small gesture, but a deliberate one. Emma came downstairs next, led by Sam. The boy positioned himself between his sister and Clara, a human shield. "We're eating Mama's food," Sam said, looking at the dishes. "I cooked it," Clara replied calmly. "But you're welcome to go hungry if you prefer." Jacob's head snapped up. "Miss Whitmore." "It's fine." Clara met Sam's glare without flinching. "I understand this is hard, all of it. But refusing to eat won't bring your mother back, and it won't make me disappear. So you can sit there and hate me while you eat, or you can sit there and hate me while you starve. Your choice." Silence. Jacob stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Sam's jaw worked. His hands clenched on the table. Then slowly, the boy picked up his spoon. He didn't say another word through the entire meal. Neither did Emma. But they ate. And Clara counted that as a victory. Later that night, after the children were in bed and the dishes were washed, Clara found herself on the porch despite the cold. The snow had stopped, and the stars were emerging scattered across the black sky like spilled salt. She heard the door open behind her. "You'll freeze out here." Jacob's voice was rough. "I needed air." He moved to stand beside her close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not touching. They stared out at the snow-covered land in silence. "You surprised me tonight," he said finally. "At supper." "How so?" "Thought you'd cry. Or apologize. Most women would have facing down Sam like that." Clara shook her head. "Crying doesn't change anything. And I've got nothing to apologize for." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're tougher than you look." "I've had to be." Another silence. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying snow from their branches. "I should tell you something," Jacob said, his voice dropping, "about why I really sent for you." Clara turned to face him. His profile was hard in the moonlight, carved from shadow and grief. "Everyone thinks it's about the children, about needing help around the house." He paused. "That's true, but it ain't the whole truth." "Then what is?" Jacob's hands gripped the porch railing. 3 weeks after Margaret died, a woman in town, Virginia Ashford, she came to me with a proposal, said she'd be happy to marry me, take care of the children, take care of everything. Clara's stomach tightened. And I almost said yes. Jacob's voice cracked. Not because I wanted to, because I was so damn tired, so damn broken that I would have said yes to anything that made the pain stop. What changed your mind? Sam? Jacob exhaled. He overheard Virginia talking to one of her friends in town, saying how once she was mistress of this ranch, she'd send Sam and Emma off to boarding school. Get rid of the baggage, she called them. Clara's hands curled into fists. Sam came home crying, first time I'd seen him cry since the funeral. Jacob's voice hardened. And I knew I couldn't let that woman anywhere near my children. But I also knew I couldn't do this alone. So you sent for a stranger. I sent for someone who had nothing to gain and nothing to lose. Someone who'd come here for survival like you said, not for land or money or status. He turned to face her, his gray eyes meeting hers. I ain't asking for love, Miss Whitmore. I ain't asking for anything except help. But I need you to know the truth. Virginia Ashford won't take kindly to you being here. She's got friends in this town, powerful friends, and she'll do everything she can to drive you away. Clara held his gaze. This broken man with his broken family warning her about battles she hadn't known she'd signed up to fight. Let her try, Clara said. Jacob's expression flickered surprise, then something that might have been respect. Get some sleep, he said quietly. Tomorrow won't be easier. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving Clara alone with the stars and the cold and the growing certainty that she'd stepped into something far more complicated than a simple arrangement. But she'd meant what she said to Ruth. She was willing to do the work, and no ghost, living or dead, was going to drive her away. Clara woke before dawn. The cold had seeped through the walls overnight, and her breath came out in white puffs as she pushed back the quilts. Margaret's quilts, she reminded herself. Everything in this house belonged to a ghost. She dressed quickly, pulling on her warmest dress and the wool shawl Ruth had left behind. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she made her way downstairs, and she paused at Emma's door, listening. Silence. The kitchen was dark, the fire reduced to embers. Clara knelt before the hearth, feeding kindling into the ashes, blowing gently until flames caught. By the time she had coffee brewing and biscuits in the oven, pale light was creeping through the windows. You're up early? Clara turned. Jacob stood in the doorway, already dressed for work, his coat dusted with hay. Couldn't sleep, she said. That makes two of us. He crossed to the stove, poured himself coffee without asking. Zeke says the cattle are restless. Storm coming, maybe. I'll be out most of the day. What about the children? Sam's got chores. Emma stays in her room mostly. Jacob took a long drink of coffee, his eyes on the window. Ruth said she might come by later. Check on things. Clara nodded. She pulled the biscuits from the oven, set them on a cloth to cool. Mr. McAllister. Jacob. Jacob. She turned to face him. Last night what you told me about Virginia Ashford. Should I be worried? His jaw tightened. Worried ain't the right word. Careful is better. Careful how? Virginia's husband died 2 years back. Left her with money and land, but no children, no family. She's been looking for a way to secure her position ever since. Jacob set down his cup. When Margaret passed, Virginia saw her chance. A widower with a successful ranch, 2 young children who could inherit. She ain't interested in me. She's interested in what I've got. And now I'm in her way. Now you're in her way. Jacob's eyes met hers. She'll come for you, Miss Whitmore. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But she'll come. And when she does, she won't fight fair. Clara straightened her spine. Neither will I. Something flickered across Jacob's face, surprise maybe, or grudging respect. He grabbed a biscuit from the tray, pulled on his gloves. I'll be back by supper, he said, and then he was gone. Clara stood alone in the kitchen listening to his boots on the porch, the creak of the barn door, the distant whinny of horses. She had survived worse than a jealous widow with too much time on her hands. She had buried both her parents before her 19th birthday. She had lived on charity and scraps, and the thin hope that somewhere, somehow, things would get better. Virginia Ashford didn't scare her. What scared her was the boy who appeared in the doorway 10 minutes later, his eyes red-rimmed from sleep, his expression set in stone. Pa's gone, Sam asked. To check the cattle. Good. Sam grabbed a biscuit, shoved it in his pocket. I've got chores. Sam, wait. He stopped at the door, his back rigid. I know you don't want me here, Clara said carefully. I know you think I'm trying to take your mother's place, but I'm not your enemy. You ain't my friend neither. No, but I could be if you'd let me. Sam turned slowly. His eyes were hard, but beneath the hardness, Clara saw something else. Fear. The same fear she'd carried for years after losing her own parents, the terror of loving someone and losing them again. My mama used to say that, Sam said quietly, that we could be friends. When I was little and scared of the dark, she'd sit with me and say, "We're friends, Sam. Friends don't let each other be scared alone." Clara's throat tightened. She sounds like a wonderful woman. She was. Sam's voice cracked. And you ain't her. You ain't never gonna be her. So don't pretend like you can just replace what she was to me, to Emma, to Pa. I'm not pretending anything, Sam. I'm just trying to survive same as you. The boy stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked out into the cold. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That seemed to be the rhythm of this place. She was washing the breakfast dishes when she heard a small sound from the stairway, barely louder than a mouse. Clara turned slowly, keeping her movements gentle. Emma stood on the bottom step, clutching a worn piece of fabric against her chest. A handkerchief, Clara realized, embroidered with tiny flowers. "Good morning, Emma," Clara said softly. The little girl didn't respond, but she didn't run away either. Clara dried her hands on her apron, crouched down to Emma's level. "That's a pretty handkerchief. Did your mama make it?" Emma's arms tightened around the fabric. A tiny nod. "I thought so. The stitching is beautiful." Clara stayed where she was, giving the child space. "My mama used to embroider too. She made me a pillowcase with bluebells on it. I kept it under my pillow every night until—" She stopped. Until she'd had to sell it for food money 3 months after her mother's death. Some memories were too raw to share. Would you like some breakfast, Emma? I made biscuits. And there's preserved strawberry, I think. Emma's gaze flickered toward the kitchen table, then back to Clara. You don't have to talk, Clara said. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But if you're hungry, I'd like to make you something to eat. A long pause. Then Emma descended the last step and walked toward the kitchen, her small feet making almost no sound on the wooden floor. Clara followed, hope flickering in her chest, like a candle in the wind. She set out a plate for Emma: biscuit, split open preserves, spooned on top, a glass of milk from the cold cellar. The little girl ate slowly, her eyes fixed on Clara the whole time. You know, Clara said, sitting across from her, when I was your age, I didn't like talking much either. My mama used to say I was quieter than a church mouse. She smiled at the memory. But she never pushed me. She just waited. And eventually, when I was ready, the words came. Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I know that's probably scary, having someone new in your house and your life. But I want you to know I'll wait, as long as you need. The little girl set down her spoon. Her hand moved toward the handkerchief in her lap, touched the embroidered flowers. Then, so quietly, Clara almost missed it. Mama smelled like lavender. Clara's heart stopped. She did. Emma nodded, her eyes glistening. She put it in her drawers, in her clothes, so everything smelled like her. That's beautiful, Emma. I can't smell it anymore. A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. On the handkerchief. I used to smell it every night, but now it's gone, and I can't remember. Her voice broke into sobs. Clara moved without thinking, rounding the table and gathering the small girl into her arms. Emma stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against Clara's chest, crying like something inside her had finally shattered. Shh, Clara murmured, stroking Emma's hair. It's okay. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to cry. I don't want to forget her, Emma wailed. Sam says if we forget, it means we didn't love her enough. Oh, sweetheart. Clara pulled back, wiping the tears from Emma's face with gentle fingers. That's not true. Forgetting little things sounds the exact way someone laughed. That doesn't mean you didn't love them. It just means time is passing. And time has to pass even when we don't want it to. But I don't want to forget. Then we won't let you. Clara touched the embroidered handkerchief. We'll find ways to remember. Stories about your mama. Recipes she used to make. Songs she used to sing. We'll keep her alive right here. She pressed her hand against Emma's chest over her heart. Where it matters most. Emma sniffled, her small hand covering Clara's. Do you think Mama would have liked you? The question caught Clara off guard. She thought about Margaret McAllister, the woman who had made this house a home, who had sung while she made bread, who had loved her family so fiercely that they were still drowning in her absence 8 months later. I don't know, Clara said honestly, but I hope so. I hope she'd see that I'm trying to take care of the people she loved. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and touched Clara's face, a gentle, wondering touch, like she was making sure Clara was real. Your eyes are nice, Emma whispered. Mama's eyes were brown. Yours are blue like the sky. Thank you, Emma. Can we? Emma hesitated. Can we make apple pie today? You said your mama taught you. Clara smiled, her heart full to bursting. I think that's a wonderful idea. They were elbow deep in flour when the front door slammed open. Clara spun around, her hands coated in dough. Sam stood in the doorway, his face white as the snow outside. Someone's coming, he said. A fancy carriage from town. Clara's stomach dropped. Emma, sweetheart, go upstairs. But the pie? I'll finish it. Go upstairs and stay in your room until I come get you. Emma's eyes widened at Clara's tone, but she obeyed, scurrying up the stairs with her handkerchief clutched against her chest. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, walked to the window. Sure enough, a black carriage was approaching the ranch, pulled by 2 matching bay horses, the kind of carriage that cost more than most families made in a year. It's her, Sam said, his voice tight. Mrs. Ashford. How do you know? Nobody else in Willow Creek has a carriage like that. Sam moved to stand beside Clara, his earlier hostility temporarily forgotten. She came once before. Right after Mama died. Pa sent her away. What did she want? To help. Sam's lip curled. That's what she said anyway. But I heard her talking to Pa. Heard her say she could give him everything Mama couldn't. That she could make him forget. Clara's hands curled into fists. Stay inside, Sam. But inside. She walked out onto the porch before the boy could argue. The carriage had stopped at the edge of the property. A driver climbed down, opened the door, and extended his hand to help a woman descend. Virginia Ashford was beautiful. Clara could see that immediately, the kind of beauty that came from good breeding and better tailoring. She wore a deep blue dress trimmed with fur, her dark hair swept up beneath a fashionable hat. Her skin was pale and perfect, untouched by sun or labor. She looked at Clara the way a cat looks at a mouse. Well, Virginia said, approaching the porch with measured steps. You must be the mail-order bride. Clara Whitmore. Clara didn't descend the steps. Let Virginia come to her. And you must be Mrs. Ashford. My reputation precedes me. Virginia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I thought I should introduce myself. Welcome you to Willow Creek properly. That's kind of you. Isn't it? Virginia stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at Clara. I must say you're younger than I expected. Jacob's advertisement didn't mention his preferences. Mr. McAllister's preferences are his own business. Of course, of course. Virginia's gaze swept over Clara's flour-dusted apron, her simple dress, her work-roughened hands. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, where are you from? Missouri. Missouri, how rustic. Virginia adjusted her gloves, a practiced gesture. And what brought you all the way to Wyoming? Surely there were opportunities closer to home. Clara smiled thinly. I was looking for a fresh start. Weren't we all? Virginia's eyes sharpened. I wonder, though, have you considered what happens when the novelty wears off? When Jacob realizes that a young girl from Missouri isn't equipped to run a household like this, to raise children who've already lost one mother. I imagine I'll manage. Will you? Virginia stepped closer, lowering her voice. Because I've seen girls like you, Miss Whitmore. Desperate. Alone. Willing to attach yourself to any man who'll have you. But desperation isn't the same as capability. And Jacob McAllister deserves someone who can actually help him, not another burden to carry. Clara's blood ran cold, but she kept her voice steady. Is that what you'd be, Mrs. Ashford? Help? I'd be exactly what he needs. Virginia's smile turned sharp. A woman of means, of standing. Someone who can secure his children's future, not some penniless orphan who'll drain his resources and disappear when times get hard. I'm not going anywhere. We'll see. Virginia turned, walking back toward her carriage with unhurried elegance. We'll see how long that resolve lasts, when winter really sets in. When the cattle start dying and the money runs out and those children look at you with nothing but resentment in their eyes. She paused at the carriage door, looking back over her shoulder. Enjoy your time here, Miss Whitmore, however long it lasts. The driver helped her inside. The carriage pulled away, wheels crunching through the snow. Clara stood on the porch until it disappeared from view, her hands shaking, not from cold, but from rage. She's awful. Clara turned. Sam stood in the doorway, his face pale, but his eyes burning with something new, something that wasn't hatred. Yeah, Clara said. She is. Pa wouldn't really marry her, would he? Not if I have anything to say about it. Sam stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Good. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was something, a crack in the wall he'd built between them. Clara would take it. Ruth arrived an hour later, her wagon loaded with supplies. Heard Virginia's carriage heading out this way. Ruth said, climbing down with a basket on her arm. Thought I'd better come check on you. How'd you know it was her? Honey, there's only one woman in Willow Creek vain enough to take a carriage through 3 inches of snow. Ruth followed Clara into the house, stamping her boots on the mat. What'd she say? Clara told her. Ruth's expression darkened with every word. That woman's got more nerve than a toothache, Ruth muttered. Always has. When her husband Harold was alive, he kept her in check. But since he passed, she's been like a snake without a handler. All venom and ambition. She threatened me. Of course she did. You're standing between her and everything she wants. Ruth set her basket on the table, began unpacking. But don't let her scare you. Virginia's powerful, but she's not invincible. She's got enemies in this town. People who remember how she treated Harold, how she treated her servants, how she looks down on anyone without money or status. That doesn't help me much if she turns the whole town against me. She won't. Not everyone, anyway. And the ones she does turn... Ruth smiled grimly. They weren't worth having on your side to begin with. Clara sank into a chair, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her. I don't understand why she cares so much. There must be other men, other ranches. None like this one. Ruth's voice softened. The McAllister land is some of the best in the territory. Good water, good grazing protected from the worst of the winter winds. And Jacob's got a reputation. Honest, hard-working, the kind of man other men respect. She paused. Virginia doesn't want a husband, honey. She wants an empire, and Jacob McAllister is the foundation she needs to build it. Then she's going to be disappointed. That's the spirit. Ruth reached across the table, squeezed Clara's hand. Now, tell me about those children. Sam's still giving you grief. Clara thought about the boy's face when Virginia's carriage pulled away, the crack in his armor. I think we're making progress. Good. And Emma, she spoke to me today. Ruth's eyes widened, spoke actual words. She told me her mama smelled like lavender, and she asked if we could make apple pie together. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening. Oh, honey, that's more words than she's said to anyone since Margaret passed, even Jacob. Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how significant Emma's words were, how long the little girl had been locked inside her silent grief. She's hurting, Clara said. They both are. Sam hides it behind anger. Emma hides it behind silence. But underneath, they're just children who miss their mother. And they need someone to help them heal. Ruth wiped her eyes. I think you might be that someone, Clara Whitmore, whether you believe it or not. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. Ruth helped Clara finish the apple pie, Margaret's recipe. Ruth said passed down from her own mother, and by the time the sun began to set, the whole house smelled of cinnamon and warm apples. Sam came in from his chores, snow melting in his hair. Smells like... He stopped, his face going pale. Apple pie, Clara said gently. Emma wanted to learn to make it. Sam's jaw tightened. For a moment, Clara thought he would explode, accuse her of trying to replace his mother again, storm off into the cold. Instead, he walked to the stove, looked at the pie cooling on the rack. Mama's recipe, he asked quietly. Ruth showed me. Sam was silent for a long moment. Then, she always burned the edges. Mama said it was because the oven ran hot, but Pa said it was because she got distracted singing and forgot to watch the timer. Clara smiled. What did she sing? Old hymns mostly, and one about a river, down in the valley, I think it was called. I know that one. My mama used to sing it too. Sam looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd arrived. You ain't what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone cold. Someone who'd come in and change everything and act like Mama never existed. He shoved his hands in his pockets. But you keep asking about her. Wanting to know things. Like she matters. She does matter, Sam. She'll always matter. Nothing I do is going to change that. Sam nodded slowly. He opened his mouth to say something else, but the sound of hoofbeats cut him off. Jacob was riding in from the range, his horse kicking up snow with every stride. Even from a distance, Clara could see the tension in his posture. "Something's wrong," Sam said. They met Jacob at the barn. He dismounted quickly, his face grim. "We lost 3 head today," he said. "Found them by the north fence, frozen." Sam's face went white. 3? But that's... I know what it is. Jacob's voice was tight. "Between last winter and this one, we can't afford to lose anymore. If the cold keeps up..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Clara stepped forward. "What can I do?" Jacob looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. "There's nothing you can do. Nothing anyone can do except pray for an early spring. I can help with the ranch work, free you up to spend more time with the herd. You know anything about cattle?" "No, but I can learn." Jacob stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, something shifted in his expression. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow. Zeke will show you the basics." He walked past her toward the house, his shoulders heavy with worry. Sam watched him go, then turned to Clara. "He's scared," the boy said quietly. "I ain't never seen Pa scared before. Not even when Mama..." He couldn't finish. Clara put her hand on his shoulder, the first time she'd touched him since arriving. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Together." Sam didn't pull away. Supper that night was quiet. The apple pie sat on the table, golden and perfect, but nobody seemed to have much appetite. Emma ate 3 bites before asking to be excused. Sam pushed food around his plate, lost in thought. Jacob stared at the wall, his coffee going cold. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "How bad is it? Really?" Jacob's eyes focused on her. "Bad. We lost 40 head last winter. Started this season with 200. If we lose another 30 or 40... He shook his head. "The bank's already breathing down my neck. Horace Crenshaw's been waiting for me to fail ever since my father died." "Why?" "Old grudge. My father caught him cheating at cards 30 years ago. Called him out in front of the whole town. Horace never forgave him for it." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Now he holds the note on this land, and he'd love nothing more than to see me lose everything." Clara thought about Virginia Ashford's words. "When the cattle start dying and the money runs out." She knew, Clara said. Virginia. She came here today and she talked about the cattle dying, about money running out. Like she already knew what was happening. Jacob went very still. "She was here. This afternoon. Drove up in that fancy carriage of hers, started telling me how I wasn't good enough for you, for the children. How I should leave before things got hard." Jacob's hands curled into fists on the table. "What else did she say? That she could give you everything. That you deserved someone with means, with standing." Clara met his eyes. "She wants this ranch, Jacob. Ruth told me. She wants to build an empire, and you're the foundation." "That woman." Jacob pushed back from the table, began pacing. "She's been circling this family like a vulture since before Margaret was even cold. Coming around with her casseroles and her sympathy offering to take the children, offering to help with the books. I told her no. Told her 100 times. And now I'm in her way." Jacob stopped pacing. He looked at Clara, this girl he'd brought into his home, this stranger who'd already proven herself tougher than anyone expected. "Yeah," he said. "You are, and I reckon that makes you a target." "I'm not afraid of her." "You should be." Jacob moved closer, his voice dropping. "Virginia Ashford doesn't fight fair. She'll go after your reputation, your character. She'll spread lies and rumors until the whole town looks at you like you're something dirty. And if that doesn't work, then she'll find another way." Jacob's eyes were hard. "I've seen her destroy people, Clara. Good people. People who thought they were safe." Clara stood facing him. They were close now, close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his beard. Then we fight back, she said. Together. You don't know what you're signing up for. Maybe not, but I know what I'm running from, and I'd rather fight for something than keep running forever. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, then so softly she almost missed it. Margaret would have liked you. Clara's heart stuttered. You think so? I know so. She had a saying, show me a woman who ain't afraid of hard work, and I'll show you a woman worth knowing. His voice roughened. You're worth knowing, Clara Whitmore. It was the most personal thing he'd said to her since she arrived. Before she could respond, a small voice came from the stairway. Papa? They both turned. Emma stood on the bottom step, her handkerchief clutched in her hands. Clara said we could remember Mama together. Emma said, her voice trembling. She said we could keep Mama alive in our hearts. Is that true? Jacob's face crumpled. He crossed to his daughter, knelt down, and pulled her into his arms. Yeah, baby girl, he whispered. That's true. I don't want to forget her. You won't. I promise you won't. Clara watched them, this broken man and his broken daughter, holding each other in the dim kitchen, and felt something shift inside her chest. She'd come here looking for survival. But maybe, just maybe, she'd found something more. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind howl outside her window. The storm Jacob had predicted was coming, and it was coming fast. A knock at her door made her bolt upright. Clara? Sam's voice muffled through the wood. You awake? She crossed to the door, opened it. Sam stood in the hallway, a lantern in his hand, his face pale. It's Emma, he said. She's burning up. Clara was at Emma's bedside before her heart took its next beat. The little girl lay tangled in her sheets, her skin flushed and damp, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Clara pressed her hand to Emma's forehead and felt fire. How long has she been like this? Clara demanded. I don't know. Sam's voice shook. I heard her crying through the wall. When I came in, she was... Get your father, now. Sam ran. Clara pulled the quilts back, searching for other signs. Emma's nightgown was soaked through with sweat. Her lips were dry, cracked. When Clara lifted her eyelid, the little girl moaned but didn't wake. Clara. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I don't feel good. I know, sweetheart. I know. Clara smoothed the damp hair from Emma's face. We're going to take care of you. I promise. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Jacob burst into the room, his face white. Emma, baby, can you hear me? Papa? Emma's eyes fluttered open. My head hurts. Jacob looked at Clara, terror in his eyes. We need a doctor, Clara said. Doc Harrison's in town, 3 miles. Then go. I can't leave her. What if she... Jacob's voice broke. Jacob. Clara gripped his arm. I stayed with my mother through 6 weeks of fever before she passed. I know what to do. But Emma needs medicine I don't have. You have to ride to town. The storm. I don't care about the storm. Go. Jacob stared at her for one long moment. Then he pulled Emma into his arms, kissed her forehead, and set her back down gently. I'll be back before dawn, he said. I swear it. He was gone before Clara could respond. Is Papa going to be okay? Sam asked from the doorway. Your father's the toughest man I've ever met. He'll be fine. Clara turned to the boy. I need you to help me. Can you do that? Sam nodded, his jaw set. Good. I need cold water from the well, as cold as you can get it, and clean cloths from the linen closet. What are you going to do? I'm going to fight this fever. Now go. Sam ran. Clara turned back to Emma, her mind racing. Fever this high, this fast, it could mean a dozen things, none of them good. Influenza, scarlet fever, pneumonia. Her mother had taught her the signs, the treatments, the prayers you said when nothing else worked. She wasn't going to lose this child. Clara. Emma's small hand found hers. Am I going to die like Mama? Clara's heart shattered. "No, sweetheart." She squeezed Emma's hand tight. "You're going to be just fine. I won't let anything happen to you. Promise." "I promise." The next hours blurred together. Clara worked without stopping, cooling Emma's skin with damp cloths, dripping water between her cracked lips, singing the old hymns her mother used to sing during the long nights of her own illness. Sam sat in the corner watching, his face pale, but his presence steady. "You should sleep," Clara said sometime around midnight. "I ain't leaving her." Clara didn't argue. Emma's fever peaked around 2 in the morning. She thrashed against the sheets, crying out for her mother. Her words jumbled and confused. Clara held her down, kept the cool cloths coming, whispered words of comfort even when her voice gave out. "It's too high," Sam said, his voice cracking. "The fever. It's too high." "I know. What do we do?" Clara looked at Emma, this little girl who'd spoken her first words in months, to a stranger who'd asked about apple pie and lavender and whether her mama would have liked the woman who'd come to take care of them. "We don't give up," Clara said. "That's what we do." Around 3 in the morning, the fever broke. It happened suddenly. One moment Emma was burning up, the next she was soaked in sweat, her skin cooling beneath Clara's hands. Her breathing eased, her face relaxed. "Emma," Clara whispered. The little girl's eyes opened, tired but clear. "I'm thirsty," she said. Clara laughed, a sound that was half sob, and gathered Emma into her arms. "Thank God," Sam breathed from the corner. "Thank God." They were still holding vigil when Jacob burst through the door at dawn, Doc Harrison right behind him. The old doctor examined Emma with gentle hands, asked questions. Clara answered in a voice hoarse from singing and praying. When he finished, he sat back with a sigh. "The worst has passed," Doc Harrison said. "You did good work, Miss Whitmore. Kept her hydrated, kept the fever from climbing too high. Another few degrees and we might have lost her." Jacob's face went gray. "She'll need rest," Doc Harrison continued. "Fluids, warmth. But she's young and strong. She'll pull through." "What caused it?" Clara asked. "Hard to say. Could be 100 things. Winter sickness, bad food, simple exhaustion." The doctor stood, gathered his bag. "Main thing is you caught it in time. Girl's got a guardian angel watching over her." He looked at Clara when he said it. Jacob walked the doctor out. Clara stayed by Emma's side, watching the little girl drift into peaceful sleep. "You saved her." Clara turned. Sam stood in the doorway, his face raw with emotion. "I did what anyone would do." "No." Sam shook his head. "You did what Mama would have done. You stayed. You fought. You didn't give up even when—" His voice broke. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For how I treated you, for what I said. I thought you were just some stranger trying to take Mama's place. But you ain't. You're—" He struggled for words. "You're something else. Something good." Clara rose, cross to him. "Sam, you don't have to apologize. You were protecting your family. That's what you're supposed to do." "But I was wrong about you." "Maybe. But you gave me a chance to prove it. That's what matters." Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Clara held him, this angry, grieving boy who'd been carrying so much on his young shoulders, and felt something shift between them. Not quite mother and son, but the beginning of something real. Jacob found them like that when he returned. He stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Clara released Sam, suddenly self-conscious. "She's sleeping," Clara said. "Doc Harrison said she'll be okay." Jacob nodded slowly. His eyes moved from Clara to Sam to the sleeping child in the bed. "I owe you," he said quietly. "More than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything." Jacob's voice roughened. "If you hadn't been here, if I'd been alone with the kids when this happened, But you weren't alone. That's the point. Jacob stared at her. Something passed between them. Something unspoken. Something Clara wasn't ready to name. Get some sleep, he said finally. Both of you. I'll watch Emma. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stay by Emma's side to make sure the fever didn't return. But exhaustion was pulling at her bones, and she knew Jacob needed this. Needed to be the one keeping vigil over his daughter. Wake me if anything changes, she said. I will. She was halfway to her room when his voice stopped her. Clara. She turned. Jacob stood in Emma's doorway, the morning light catching the silver in his beard. Thank you, he said. For staying. Clara nodded once and walked to her room. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. The storm lasted 3 more days. Clara spent most of it by Emma's side reading stories from the few books the McAllister family owned, teaching her simple songs, helping her sip broth that Ruth had sent over before the snow made the roads impassable. Sam joined them sometimes. He'd sit at the foot of Emma's bed and tell stories about their mother, how she'd once chased a chicken clear across the yard in her Sunday dress, how she'd beaten their father at arm wrestling on their wedding night, how she'd cried for 3 days straight when Sam took his first steps because she said he was growing up too fast. Emma laughed at the stories. Actually laughed, her small body shaking with joy instead of fever. And Jacob. Jacob watched them all with something new in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. Clara woke to silence. The absence of howling wind was so stark it seemed loud. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find Jacob already in the kitchen, coffee brewing. Storm's past, he said. I noticed. Clara poured herself a cup, stood beside him at the window. How bad is it out there? Won't know until I ride out and check. Zeke's been keeping an eye on the barn animals, but the cattle... Jacob shook his head. I'm afraid to look. Then let me come with you. He turned to her surprised. You said you'd teach me about the ranch. About cattle. Clara met his eyes. I meant what I said, Jacob. I want to help. Really help. You already have. Then let me do more. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then, all right, bundle up. We leave in 10 minutes. The ride out to the north pasture was brutal. Snow came up to the horses' knees in some places. The wind had died, but the cold was vicious, cutting through Clara's layers like they weren't there. She gritted her teeth and kept riding, following Jacob's lead through the white wilderness. They found the first dead cow half a mile from the fence line, then another, and another. By the time they reached the main herd, Clara had counted 12 carcasses frozen in the snow. Jacob's face was stone, but she could see the devastation in his eyes. How many? She asked quietly. Too many. His voice was hollow. This isn't just bad luck. These cattle were driven away from the shelter. Look at the tracks. Clara looked. The snow was churned up, chaotic, not the neat patterns of cattle seeking warmth, but the scattered mess of animals being pushed, panicked. Someone did this on purpose, she said. Someone wanted them to die. Jacob dismounted, knelt beside one of the frozen carcasses. His gloved hand brushed the snow from its hide. This is Virginia's doing, he said. Has to be. Nobody else would benefit from destroying my herd. Can you prove it? Don't need to prove it. I know. He stood his face hard. She's been trying to ruin me for months. First with gossip, then with threats, now this. What are you going to do? Jacob looked at her, this woman who'd saved his daughter, who'd fought for his family, who'd refused to back down no matter what was thrown at her. I'm going to fight back, he said, and I'm going to win. They returned to the ranch to find Zeke waiting at the barn, his expression grim. Visitors, Zeke said. From town, waiting in the house. Who? Horace Crenshaw. And he ain't alone. Clara saw Jacob's jaw tighten. Stay here, he told her. No. Clara. You said we'd fight back. We. She squared her shoulders. I'm coming with you. Jacob hesitated, then nodded once. They walked into the house together. Horace Crenshaw sat at the kitchen table like he owned it. He was a heavy man in his 50s with small eyes and a smile that never reached them. Beside him stood Virginia Ashford, her expression perfectly composed. "Mr. McAllister," Horace said, not rising. "Thank you for joining us." "You're in my house uninvited," Jacob replied. "This better be good." "Oh, it is." Horace pulled a document from his coat pocket, laid it on the table. "I'm here about your loan, Jacob, the one that's 3 months past due." Clara saw Jacob's face go pale. "I asked for an extension. You said—" "I said I'd consider it. I've considered it." Horace's smile widened. "Request denied. Payment in full is due within 30 days, or I begin foreclosure proceedings." "You can't do that." "I can, and I will." Horace leaned back in his chair. "Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss alternative arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Clara demanded. Horace looked at her like she was a bug he'd just noticed. "This doesn't concern you, girl. Everything about this family concerns me." "Does it?" Horace exchanged a glance with Virginia. "Interesting. I'd heard Jacob brought in some mail-order bride to help with the children. Didn't realize she'd be inserting herself into financial matters." "She's my wife," Jacob said quietly. "Whatever you say to me, you say to her." The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Wife. Not arrangement. Not helper. Wife. Virginia's composed expression flickered. "Well then," Horace said, "perhaps your wife should know the full picture. Jacob here owes me $3,000. That's the principal plus interest plus penalties for missed payments. He doesn't have it. He can't get it. Which means in 30 days, this ranch, his father's ranch, his children's inheritance becomes mine." "Unless," Clara pressed. Horace smiled. "Unless Jacob accepts a very generous offer from Mrs. Ashford here. She's willing to pay off his debts in exchange for a partnership. A merger, you might call it." "A merger," Jacob repeated flatly. "Her resources, your land. Combined, you'd be the largest operation in the territory." Horace spread his hands. "It's a fair deal, better than fair considering the alternative." Clara looked at Virginia. The other woman met her gaze steadily. Triumph barely concealed behind her elegant mask. "You planned this," Clara said. "The cattle. The storm. You drove his herd into the cold to die so he couldn't make his payments." Virginia's expression didn't change. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't you Jacob found tracks? Evidence that someone scattered his cattle on purpose. Someone who wanted him to fail. Wild accusations from a desperate woman." Virginia rose gracefully, smoothing her skirts. "Jacob, you have 30 days to consider your options. I suggest you use them wisely." She walked toward the door, pausing beside Clara. "You should have left when I told you to," Virginia whispered. "Now you'll lose everything right alongside him." "Get out of my house," Clara said. Virginia smiled and swept out the door, Horace waddling behind her. The moment they were gone, Jacob slammed his fist against the wall. 30 days, he growled. 30 days and she wins. Everything my father built, everything I've worked for, gone. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Jacob turned to her, despair etched across his face. $3,000, Clara. I don't have 300. Even if I sold every head that survived, it wouldn't be enough. Clara's mind raced. There had to be something. Some option they hadn't considered. What about the other ranchers? Could they help? They're struggling too. Winter's been hard on everyone. The bank in Cheyenne? Crenshaw's got connections everywhere. He'd block any loan I tried to get. Clara sank into a chair, the weight of it all pressing down on her. There has to be something, she whispered. There has to be. There isn't. Jacob's voice was broken. Virginia's won. She's been planning this for months and she's won.
No.
Clara stood facing him. No, she hasn't won. Not yet. We still have 30 days. That's 30 days to find another solution, to fight back, to prove what she did. And if we can't, then we go down fighting. Clara took his hands, felt them trembling beneath her grip. Jacob, I didn't come all this way to give up. I didn't survive my parents dying, didn't survive being shipped to a stranger's home like cargo, didn't survive watching your daughter burn with fever just to quit when some vindictive woman thinks she's beaten us. Jacob stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes, the despair giving way to something else. You really believe we can win? He asked. I believe we have to try. A long moment passed. Then Jacob nodded slowly. All right, he said. We try. We try, Clara agreed. Together. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Clara's life. She worked alongside Jacob from dawn to dusk, riding out to check on the surviving cattle repairing fences the storm had damaged, tallying what was left of the herd. At night, she sat at the kitchen table, going over the ranch's accounts, looking for any way to raise the money they needed. Ruth came by when she could, bringing news from town. Virginia's been spreading rumors, Ruth reported one afternoon, telling everyone you're a gold digger, that you came here to steal Jacob's land and abandon his children. Let her talk, Clara said. People are listening. Then we'll give them something else to listen to. Clara started making her own trips to town. She visited the general store, the church, the homes of families Ruth said might be sympathetic. She didn't defend herself. She didn't attack Virginia. She simply let people see her, this young woman who'd traveled across the country to help a grieving family who'd saved a little girl's life, who worked harder than anyone had a right to expect. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Mrs. Patterson told me what you did for Emma, Grace Porter said one morning outside the church. Staying up all night, nursing her through that fever. She said it was the bravest thing she'd ever heard. I did what anyone would do. No. Grace shook her head. You did what a mother would do. People are starting to see that. But gossip couldn't pay debts, and time was running out. With 10 days left before Crenshaw's deadline, Clara sat at the kitchen table staring at columns of numbers that refused to add up. Jacob had gone to bed an hour ago, exhausted. The children were sleeping. The house was silent except for the tick of the clock on the mantel. She was about to give up when she noticed something. A line item in the old account books. A payment made to Monsieur Ashford 5 years ago. $300. Clara frowned. M. Ashford. Margaret Ashford. Number Virginia's husband had been named Harold. But Virginia's maiden name? Clara's heart began to pound. She pulled more account books from the shelf, flipping through pages of cramped handwriting. There another payment to M. Ashford, and another, and another. Over 3 years, Jacob's father had paid nearly $2,000 to someone named M. Ashford. Why? Clara grabbed a lantern and made her way to the attic. Ruth had mentioned that the McAllister family kept old letters and documents stored up there. If there were answers, that's where she'd find them. She searched for hours. And just before dawn, she found it. A bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. The handwriting was elegant feminine. The signature at the bottom, Margaret Virginia Ashford. Clara read the letters twice, her hands shaking. Margaret Virginia Ashford, Virginia's older sister, a woman who had been engaged to Jacob's father before dying of consumption. A woman who had been promised a portion of the McAllister land in her father's will, a promise that had never been honored. The payments weren't bribes or blackmail. They were inheritance. Money Jacob's father had been sending to Virginia's family to settle the old debt. And buried among the letters was one final document, a signed agreement, stating that upon completion of all payments, the Ashford family relinquished all claims to McAllister land. Permanently. Virginia's claims weren't just unfounded. They were invalid. Clara ran downstairs, bursting into Jacob's room. "Jacob! Jacob, wake up!" He shot upright, reaching for the rifle beside his bed. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Clara thrust the papers into his hands. "Everything's right. Look at this. Look!" Jacob read the documents. His face went through a dozen expressions: confusion, disbelief, hope. "This is proof. Proof that your father already settled with the Ashford family. Proof that Virginia has no legal claim to anything." Clara was breathless. "Don't you see? She's been lying. This whole time she's been lying. But the loan, Crenshaw was working with her. If we expose this, show everyone what they've been doing." Clara gripped his arm. "Jacob, we can beat them. We can win." Jacob stared at the papers in his hands, then at Clara. "How did you find this?" "I looked. I didn't give up." Something broke open in Jacob's expression. Before Clara knew what was happening, he was out of bed, pulling her into his arms. "You incredible woman," he breathed against her hair. "You incredible, impossible woman." Clara held him back, her heart pounding. "We're not done yet," she whispered. "We still have to prove it." "We'll prove it." Jacob pulled back, his eyes fierce. "Tomorrow we take this to the Reverend, to the sheriff, to everyone who'll listen. And Virginia, Jacob said, is about to find out what happens when you underestimate a McAllister." Clara smiled. "And a Whitmore." Jacob's hands came up to cup her face. His eyes searched hers, asking a question he didn't say out loud. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Two broken people finding each other in the dark. But then Jacob's arms tightened around her, and Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate and real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't expect this," he said quietly. "Didn't expect you." "Neither did I." "Clara, I need you to know this isn't about the ranch. It isn't about what you found. It's about you, about who you are." He pulled back, met her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been since the day you told Sam you weren't his enemy." Clara's throat tightened. "Jacob, you don't have to say it back. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens with Virginia and Crenshaw, I love you. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "You already are," she whispered. "You've been worthy since the moment you gave me a choice, since you told me I could leave and you'd pay my passage, no questions asked. I didn't want you to go. I didn't want to leave." Jacob kissed her again, softer this time, a promise. "We should sleep," he murmured. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "I don't think I can sleep." "Then stay." He pulled her close, tucked her head beneath his chin. "Just stay." They lay together in the dark, not sleeping, just holding each other. Two people who had found something unexpected in the midst of loss. Something worth fighting for. And in the morning, they would fight. Together. Dawn broke cold and sharp over Willow Creek. Clara dressed in her best dress, the blue one she'd been saving for church, and pinned her hair back with hands that refused to stop trembling. In the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. Stronger, fiercer, ready for battle. Jacob was waiting downstairs with the documents tucked inside his coat. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." Ruth had spread the word overnight. By the time Clara and Jacob reached town, half of Willow Creek was gathered outside the church, ranchers, shopkeepers, farmers, their wives and children. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when the McAllisters finally stood up to Virginia Ashford. Reverend Cooper met them at the church steps. "Jacob, Mrs. McAllister." His eyes were grave. "I hope you know what you're doing." "We do, Reverend." Jacob's voice was steady. "We're telling the truth. That's all. The truth can be a dangerous thing in a town like this. So can lies." Clara stepped forward. "Virginia Ashford has been lying to this town for months. It's time everyone knew it." The Reverend studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Come inside, both of you." The church was packed. Clara had never seen so many people crammed into the small building. They lined the pews, stood against the walls, crowded the doorway. The air was thick with whispers and tension. Virginia Ashford sat in the front row, Horace Crenshaw beside her. She wore a green silk dress that must have cost more than most families made in a year. Her expression was serene, confident. She had no idea what was coming. "Friends," Reverend Cooper began, his voice carrying through the silence. "We're gathered here because serious accusations have been made, accusations that affect all of us. I've asked Jacob McAllister to speak first." Jacob rose, walked to the front of the church. Clara watched him, this man, who had spent months retreating into silence, into grief, and saw something new in his posture. Strength. Determination. "Most of you know me," Jacob said. "You knew my father. You know what this ranch means to my family." He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd. 3 weeks ago, Horace Crenshaw came to my home and told me I had 30 days to pay off my loan, or lose everything. He said I had no choice but to accept Virginia Ashford's offer of partnership. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What he didn't tell you, what Virginia didn't want anyone to know, is that this whole thing was a setup from the start. Virginia's composure flickered. "Jacob," she said smoothly, "I understand you're upset, but making wild accusations won't help. I'm not making accusations." Jacob pulled the documents from his coat. "I'm stating facts, and I have the proof right here." The church went silent. 5 years ago, my father made a deal with the Ashford family. Virginia's older sister, Margaret Virginia Ashford, had been engaged to my father before she died. Her family claimed they were owed a portion of our land. Jacob held up the papers. My father paid them, $2,000 over 3 years. And when the debt was settled, both parties signed an agreement releasing all claims to McAllister property, permanently. "That's ridiculous," Virginia snapped. "Those documents could be forgeries." "They're not forgeries." Clara stood, her voice cutting through the noise. "I found them in the McAllister attic, buried with letters from your sister, letters in her own handwriting, letters that prove the debt was paid in full before she died." Virginia's face went pale. "This is absurd. You're a stranger here. You don't know anything about our families, our history." "I know enough." Clara walked forward, standing beside Jacob. "I know you've been spreading lies about me since the day I arrived. I know you threatened me, told me to leave before things got hard. And I know your cattle scattered in that storm didn't scatter on their own." Gasps from the crowd. "Are you accusing me of sabotage?" Virginia's voice rose. "That's slander. I could have you arrested. Go ahead and try." Clara's voice was steady. "But first, maybe you should explain why your ranch hand Billy Dawson was seen near the McAllister property the night before the storm hit." Virginia froze. Ruth stepped forward from the crowd. "I saw him too, riding back toward the Ashford place around midnight. Thought it was strange at the time, but now—" "This is conspiracy," Virginia sputtered. "You're all conspiring against me." "No, ma'am." Sheriff Tucker pushed through the crowd, his badge glinting. "What's happening here is justice. I've had my suspicions about you for a while now. This just confirms them. You can't prove anything. Maybe not about the cattle, but these documents." Sheriff Tucker took the papers from Jacob, examined them. "These I can verify, and if they're legitimate, then your claims against McAllister property are null and void." Virginia turned to Crenshaw, her eyes wild. "Horace, tell them. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." But Crenshaw was already backing toward the door, his face the color of ash. "Don't you dare," Virginia hissed. "Don't you dare abandon me now." "Sheriff." Crenshaw's voice shook. "I had no knowledge of any fraud. Mrs. Ashford approached me with documents she claimed were legitimate. I was deceived just like everyone else." "You lying coward!" Virginia lunged toward him, her composure shattering completely. "We had a deal. You promised me. Promised you what exactly?" Sheriff Tucker stepped between them. "Go on, Mrs. Ashford. Tell us all what Mr. Crenshaw promised you." Virginia's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. "That's what I thought." The sheriff turned to his deputy. "Take Mrs. Ashford to the jail. We'll sort out formal charges later." "You can't do this." Virginia struggled as the deputy took her arm. "I'm Virginia Ashford. My husband was one of the most respected men in this territory." "Your husband was a good man," Ruth said quietly. "You're not." The deputy led Virginia out of the church. Her screams echoed through the building until the doors swung shut behind her. In the silence that followed, Clara felt her knees go weak. It was over. It was finally over. Jacob's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe." "Is it real?" she whispered. "Did we actually win?" "We won." His voice was thick. "Because of you. All of this because of you." The crowd began to move, pressing forward with questions and congratulations. Ruth reached them first, pulling Clara into a fierce hug. "I knew it," Ruth said, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you were something special the moment I met you. I just did what needed doing." "No, honey. You did what nobody else could. You saved that family." Other townspeople followed the Porters. The Pattersons' families Clara had visited over the past weeks. They shook Jacob's hand, touched Clara's arm, offered words of support and apology, forever believing Virginia's lies. Through it all, Clara kept looking toward the church doors. "The children," she said suddenly. "Sam and Emma, they don't know what happened." "Zeke's with them." Jacob squeezed her hand. "But you're right. We should get home." They made their way through the crowd, accepting final congratulations, promising to come to the church social next week. Clara's head was spinning. Just outside the church, Sheriff Tucker stopped them. "McAllister, Mrs. McAllister." He tipped his hat. "I owe you both an apology. Should have looked into Virginia's activities a long time ago. Got blinded by her money and her fancy ways." "You're making it right now," Jacob said. "That's what matters." Still. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "About that loan. Crenshaw's going to be facing charges of his own for conspiracy. Bank's going to need new management. Might be willing to renegotiate terms with their customers. Give folks a fair shake for once." Clara's heart lifted. "You think they'd extend Jacob's deadline?" "I think they'll do whatever it takes to avoid the scandal of foreclosing on a man who just exposed corruption in their ranks." Sheriff Tucker almost smiled. "Go home, McAllisters. Take care of those kids. The storm's past." They rode home in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, the kind that comes when two people have said everything that needed saying and can simply exist together without words. Jacob kept one hand on the reins, and the other wrapped around Clara's, their fingers intertwined. When the ranch came into view, Clara felt tears prick her eyes. It was still standing, still theirs, still home. Sam burst out of the house before they'd even reached the barn. "Pa, Clara! What happened? Zeke wouldn't tell us anything." Jacob dismounted, caught his son's shoulders. "It's over, Sam. Virginia's been arrested. The ranch is safe." Sam's face went through a dozen emotions: confusion, disbelief, hope, and finally something that looked like joy. "You mean we're not losing the farm?" "We're not losing anything. Not the farm. Not each other." Jacob pulled his son into a hug. "We're going to be okay." Emma appeared in the doorway, her handkerchief clutched against her chest. "Clara?" Clara crossed to her, knelt down. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" "Better." Emma's eyes searched Clara's face. "Did you beat the mean lady?" Clara laughed, a sound that was half sob. "Yeah, baby. We beat the mean lady." Emma threw her arms around Clara's neck. "I knew you would. You're the bravest person I know." Clara held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the small heartbeat against her own. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not land or money or victory. Family. Zeke appeared on the porch, his weathered face split in a rare smile. "Heard you two caused quite a ruckus in town." "Just set things right," Jacob said. "Should have been done a long time ago." Zeke's eyes moved to Clara. "Seems to me like some things had to happen first. Had to have the right person fighting alongside you." Clara met his gaze. The old man nodded once, a gesture of respect of acceptance. "Come on inside," Zeke said. "Got coffee brewing. Figure we all earned a rest." That night, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Clara and Jacob sat on the porch together. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Stars scattered across the darkness, like spilled diamonds. "I keep waiting to wake up," Clara said softly. "Waiting for this to all be a dream." "It's not a dream." Jacob's arm tightened around her. "It's real. All of it." Everything happened so fast. A month ago, I was stepping off that stagecoach thinking I'd made the worst mistake of my life. And now? Clara turned to look at him. This man who had been a stranger, then a partner, and now something so much more. Now I know it was the best decision I ever made. Jacob's hand came up to cup her face. "Clara, I need to ask you something. Anything. That day I told you about Virginia's offer. When I said I'd almost married her, just to make the pain stop." He paused, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I want you to know what I feel for you isn't like that. It isn't about filling a hole or replacing what I lost. It's about building something new, something I never expected to find again." "I know. Do you?" His eyes searched hers. "Because I need you to understand. Margaret was my first love. She'll always have a piece of my heart. But you're my second chance, and I don't want to waste it." Clara's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to do this right." Jacob took her hands in his. "I want to court you properly. Take you to church socials and Sunday dinners. Let the whole town see that you're not just some arrangement I made out of desperation. You're the woman I choose, every day, for the rest of my life." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "Jacob, I know we're already married on paper. I know we've been living under the same roof for weeks, but I want you to have what you deserve. Romance, flowers, dancing, all the things you probably dreamed about when you were a girl. I stopped dreaming about those things a long time ago. Then let me give them back to you." Jacob pressed his forehead to hers. "Let me spend the rest of my life making you believe in dreams again." Clara kissed him, not desperate like before, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "To all of it. Yes." The weeks that followed were the happiest Clara had ever known. True to his word, Jacob courted her like they were just starting out. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadow, left small gifts on her pillow, took her for rides across the property at sunset. He held her hand in church, danced with her at the town social, introduced her to everyone as "my wife Clara," with a pride in his voice that made her heart sing. The children blossomed too. Sam started calling her Clara instead of Miss Whitmore, a small change that meant everything. He showed her his favorite fishing spots, taught her to shoot a rifle, asked her opinion on things like he actually valued what she thought. And Emma. Emma talked now. Really talked. She chattered through breakfast, sang while she did her chores, asked Clara 100 questions a day about everything from cooking to sewing to what it was like to grow up in Missouri. One evening, as Clara tucked her into bed, Emma grabbed her hand. "Clara, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetheart." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "I prayed for you before you came. I asked God to send someone to help Papa, to make our family whole again." Clara's eyes filled. "You did?" "Mm-hmm. And then you came." Emma squeezed her hand. "You're my answered prayer." Clara couldn't speak. She just leaned down and pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, holding her close until the little girl drifted off to sleep. When she came downstairs, she found Jacob waiting for her in the kitchen. "Everything okay?" he asked. "More than okay." Clara wiped her eyes. "Emma just told me she prayed for me before I came. She said I'm her answered prayer." Something moved across Jacob's face, grief and joy tangled together. Margaret used to say that the best things in life are the ones we pray for without knowing what we're asking. He pulled Clara into his arms. "I reckon she was right." "You think Margaret would approve of us?" "I think Margaret would say, I'm the luckiest man alive to have loved two women who could turn my children's tears into laughter." Jacob tilted her chin up. "And I think she'd be right." Spring came early that year. The snow melted, the creek swelled with fresh water. New calves were born strong and healthy, promising a good season ahead. Jacob rode out every morning with hope on his face, came home every evening with stories of the ranch's recovery. Clara threw herself into the work alongside him. She learned to rope cattle, to mend fences, to read the weather by the color of the sky. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned by the sun, her body strong in ways it had never been before. One morning in late March, Ruth arrived with news. "Virginia's trial is set for next month," Ruth said, settling into a kitchen chair. "Heard she's been trying to bribe her way out, but nobody's biting." "Good." Clara poured coffee for them both. "She deserves whatever's coming." "There's more." Ruth's eyes sparkled. "Horace Crenshaw turned evidence against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. Told the sheriff everything, how Virginia planned the whole thing, how she paid Billy Dawson to scatter the cattle, how she'd been scheming to take over the McAllister ranch for years." Why was she so obsessed with this place?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. "It's about her sister, Margaret Virginia Ashford, the one who died." "I know about her. The engagement to Jacob's father. What you don't know is that Virginia was in love with him too." Ruth shook her head. "Both sisters in love with the same man. Margaret won, got engaged, got the promise of land and family. And then she died, and Virginia had to watch everything she wanted slip away." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "So this whole time, it was never about the ranch." "Not really." Ruth's voice was soft. "It was about taking back what she thought should have been hers. Punishing the McAllister family for choosing her sister over her." "That's—" Clara couldn't find the words. "Tragic, twisted both." Ruth sighed. "Virginia's spent her whole life eaten up by jealousy and resentment, and in the end, it destroyed her. That's what happens when you let bitterness take root. It poisons everything it touches." Clara thought about her own life, the losses, the pain, the moments when bitterness would have been so easy. "I'm glad I came here," she said quietly. "I'm glad I chose to build something instead of letting the hurt consume me." "So am I, honey." Ruth squeezed her hand. "So am I." That Sunday, Reverend Cooper made an announcement. "Before we close today's service, I have something special to share." He smiled at Jacob and Clara seated in the front row with Sam and Emma. "Jacob McAllister has asked me to perform a ceremony, a renewal of vows, a chance to declare before God and this community what has already become clear to everyone who knows them, that this family forged through hardship and hope is built on love." Whispers swept through the congregation. Clara's heart hammered. "Jacob," she whispered, "you didn't tell me." Wanted to surprise you." He took her hand, pulled her to her feet. "Clara Ann McAllister, I married you on paper before I knew your heart. Now I want to marry you in truth, in front of everyone. Will you do me the honor?" Clara looked at him, this man who had given her a home, a family, a future she never dared to dream. "Yes," she breathed. 1,000 times yes. They stood before the reverent hands clasped while the whole town watched. "Do you, Jacob Thomas McAllister, take Clara Ann Whitmore as your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and in health for all the days of your life?" "I do." Jacob's voice rang clear and strong. "And do you, Clara Ann Whitmore, take Jacob Thomas McAllister as your husband, to love and honor, to stand beside him through whatever storms may come?" Clara looked at her husband, her real husband in every way that mattered. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again." Reverend Cooper smiled. "You may kiss your bride, Jacob." Jacob pulled her close and kissed her while the congregation cheered. Sam whooped. Emma clapped and bounced on her toes. Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. And Clara McAllister, who had once believed she was destined for nothing more than survival, kissed her husband back and felt her heart overflow with joy. The party afterward lasted until sunset. Tables were set up outside the church laden with food the townspeople had brought. Fiddles played. Children ran laughing through the spring grass. Jacob danced with Emma on his feet, while Sam pretended to be too old for such things, then grabbed Clara's hand and spun her in an awkward waltz that left them both breathless with laughter. As the sun began to set, Clara slipped away from the crowd. She found a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree, watching the festivities from a distance. Her heart was so full, it almost hurt. "Mind if I join you?" She turned. Zeke stood nearby, his hat in his hands. "Please." He settled beside her, following her gaze toward the celebration. "You done good, Mrs. McAllister. Real good." "I had help." Zeke was quiet for a moment. "You know, when Jacob first told me he was sending for a mail-order bride, I thought he'd lost his mind. Thought no stranger could ever understand what this family needed. And now I think maybe God works in ways we can't understand. Sends us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it." Zeke looked at her, his eyes warm. "You weren't just what this family needed, Clara. You were what this whole town needed. Someone brave enough to stand up for what's right. Someone strong enough to love a broken family back together." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you, Zeke. That means more than you know." "Just telling the truth." He stood, brushed off his pants. "Now get back to that party. Your husband's looking for you." Clara rose, started to walk toward the celebration. Then she stopped. "Zeke." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you for everything you've done for this family. For being here when they needed you. For trusting me when you had no reason to." The old man smiled, a rare, beautiful thing. "That's what family does, Mrs. McAllister. We take care of each other." Clara watched him walk back toward the barn, her heart full. Family. That's what she had now. A real, true, imperfect, beautiful family. She returned to the party just as Jacob was looking for her. He caught her hand, pulled her close. "Where'd you disappear to?" "Just needed a moment, taking it all in." "And what's the verdict?" Clara looked at the celebration around them. Ruth laughing with Grace Porter. Sam chasing Emma through the grass, the whole town gathered together in joy. "I think I'm the luckiest woman in Wyoming territory." Jacob kissed her forehead. "I think we're both pretty lucky." "Papa Clara!" Emma came running, her braids flying behind her. "Come quick! Sam caught a frog, and it escaped, and now Mrs. Patterson is screaming." Jacob laughed, a sound Clara had heard more in the past weeks than in all the time before. "Duty calls," he said. "Always does." Clara squeezed his hand. "Let's go save Mrs. Patterson." They ran toward the commotion together, hand in hand, laughter trailing behind them like music. And Clara McAllister, who had stepped off a stagecoach into a stranger's life, who had fought ghosts and gossip and greedy villains, who had found love in the most unexpected place. Clara McAllister was finally completely home. Summer arrived like a blessing over Willow Creek. The McAllister ranch flourished. Cattle grew fat on fresh grass. The garden Clara had planted burst with vegetables, and every morning Jacob woke with a smile that had been absent from his face for longer than he could remember. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the hills gold. "You're up early." She turned. Jacob stood in the doorway, his hair still mussed from sleep. "Couldn't sleep." She touched her stomach without thinking. "Felt restless." "Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect." Clara crossed to him, pressed a kiss to his cheek. "I was just thinking about how different things are now. How different I am." "Different how?" "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was so scared, so convinced I was walking into a life of quiet desperation." She rested her head against his chest. "I never imagined I'd find this. Find you." Jacob's arms wrapped around her. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never see coming." "Now you sound like Ruth." "Ruth's a wise woman." Clara laughed, but it faded quickly. Jacob pulled back, studying her face. "What is it?" "Something's on your mind." She hesitated. There was something she'd been carrying for days now, afraid to speak aloud. "Clara." Jacob tilted her chin up. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." "I know. I just—" She took a breath. "I've been feeling strange lately, tired, sick in the mornings." Jacob went very still. "Sick how?" "The way my mother described feeling when she was—" Clara couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Jacob's face transformed shock, giving way to wonder to joy so fierce it took her breath away. "Clara, are you saying—" "I don't know for certain. I haven't seen Doc Harrison yet. But I think I might be expecting." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jacob let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and swept her into his arms. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby." "You're not upset." "Upset." He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "Clara, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed. You brought my children back to life. You saved our home. And now you're telling me we might have a child of our own." His voice broke. "I'm not upset. I'm the happiest man alive." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "I was so afraid to tell you. Afraid you'd think it was too soon. That we weren't ready." "We'll never be ready. Nobody ever is." Jacob kissed her forehead. "But we'll figure it out together. The way we've figured everything else out." "Together," Clara whispered. "I like the sound of that." The front door banged open. "Pa, Clara!" Sam's voice echoed through the house. "You gotta come see this. Emma's cow had her calf." Clara wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. Jacob squeezed her hand once before turning toward the door. "Coming, son." They would tell the children later, when they were certain, when the time was right. For now, this moment was just theirs. Doc Harrison confirmed it a week later. "About 2 months along, I'd say." The old doctor smiled, packing away his instruments. "You're healthy as a horse, Mrs. McAllister. Baby should arrive sometime in late January." Clara pressed her hand to her stomach, still flat beneath her dress. "Is there anything I should do? Anything I should avoid?" "Rest when you're tired. Eat when you're hungry. Don't lift anything too heavy." Doc Harrison paused at the door. "And try not to worry. You're young and strong. Everything's going to be just fine." When he was gone, Clara sat alone in the kitchen, trying to absorb the reality of what was happening. A baby. Her baby. Their baby. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara looked up. Ruth stood in the doorway, a basket over her arm. Ruth, I didn't hear you come in. Clearly. Ruth set down her basket, studied Clara's face. Doc Harrison just left. What did he say? Clara opened her mouth to deflect to make up some excuse. But this was Ruth. Ruth who had been there from the beginning. Ruth who had believed in her when no one else did. I'm pregnant. Ruth's eyes went wide. Oh, honey. She crossed to Clara, pulled her into a fierce hug. Oh, Clara, that's wonderful. That's the most wonderful news. Is it? Clara's voice trembled. Ruth, I'm terrified. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not ready? What if... Stop. Ruth pulled back, gripping Clara's shoulders. Listen to me. You are the strongest woman I know. You survived things that would have broken most people. You fought for this family when everyone else had given up. Her eyes glistened. You're going to be an amazing mother, Clara McAllister. Don't you dare doubt that for a second. Clara's tears finally fell. I miss my own mother so much. I wish she could be here for this. She is here. Ruth touched Clara's heart. Right here. Everything she taught you, everything she was, it lives on in you. And now it'll live on in your child. Clara cried, then really cried while Ruth held her, and let her grieve and rejoice at the same time. When the tears finally stopped, Clara felt lighter. Cleaner. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. That's what family's for. Ruth wiped her own eyes. Now, have you told Jacob? He knows. He's so happy, Ruth. Happier than I've ever seen him. And the children? Clara shook her head. Not yet. We wanted to wait until we were sure. Well, you're sure now. Ruth smiled. And those children deserve to know they're getting a brother or sister. She was right. Clara knew she was right. But telling Sam and Emma meant making it real, meant acknowledging that this family was growing, changing, becoming something new, something that might finally fully heal. They told the children that evening after supper. Jacob gathered everyone in the parlor, the room they rarely used, saved for special occasions. Sam sat on the settee looking suspicious. Emma curled up in her father's chair, her handkerchief clutched against her chest as always. We have news, Jacob said, reaching for Clara's hand. Something important to share with you both. Are we moving? Sam asked immediately. Did something happen with the ranch? Nothing like that. Clara squeezed Jacob's fingers. It's good news. At least we hope you'll think so. What is it? Emma's eyes were wide. Tell us. Clara took a deep breath. I'm going to have a baby. Silence. Sam stared at her, his expression unreadable. Emma's mouth dropped open. A baby, Emma whispered. A real baby. A real baby, Clara confirmed. Sometime in late January. That's... Sam swallowed hard. That's real soon. It'll be here before we know it, Jacob agreed. And we wanted you both to know first, because this affects all of us. This family is growing. Emma scrambled out of the chair and threw herself at Clara, wrapping her arms around Clara's waist. I always wanted a baby brother or sister, she squealed. Can it be a girl? I want a sister. We could braid each other's hair and share secrets and... We don't get to choose. Clara laughed, stroking Emma's hair. But whatever it is, I know you'll be a wonderful big sister. The best big sister ever, Emma declared. But Sam hadn't moved. Clara looked at him, this boy who had come so far, who had slowly opened his heart to her over the past months. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Sam? Jacob's voice was gentle. You okay, son? Yeah. Sam stood abruptly. Yeah, I'm fine. Just I need some air. He walked out of the parlor before anyone could stop him. Emma's face fell. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart. Sam just needs a minute." Clara kissed the top of Emma's head. "Why don't you go upstairs and get ready for bed? I'll come tuck you in soon." "But—" "Go on, Emma." The little girl obeyed reluctantly, casting worried glances over her shoulder as she climbed the stairs. When she was gone, Jacob moved toward the door. "I'll talk to him." "No." Clara touched his arm. "Let me." "Clara, please, I need to do this." Jacob hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be here if you need me." Clara found Sam in the barn sitting on a hay bale with his head in his hands. She didn't speak right away, just settled beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Sam spoke. "I ain't mad." "I didn't think you were." "I just—" His voice cracked. "Mama wanted more babies. She always talked about it, wanted a whole house full of children. And then when she finally got pregnant again, she—" He couldn't finish. Clara's heart broke. "Sam, I'm so sorry. I didn't think—" "It ain't your fault." Sam lifted his head, and she saw tears streaming down his face. "It ain't nobody's fault. It's just, I keep thinking, what if something happens to you? What if the baby? What if it's like before? Come here." Clara opened her arms. Sam hesitated for only a moment before collapsing against her, sobbing like the child he still was beneath all that grown-up armor. "I can't lose anybody else," he choked out. "I can't do it again." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Clara held him tight, rocking gently. "But you can't live your whole life afraid of losing people. That's not living. That's just waiting to die." "But what if nothing?" Clara pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "Look at me, Sam. I'm healthy. I'm strong. Doc Harrison says everything looks good. And even if something does go wrong, which it won't, we'll face it together, as a family." "You promise?" "I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." Sam wiped his face with his sleeve, embarrassed by his tears. "Sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize. Not for having feelings." Clara smoothed his hair back. "You've been carrying so much for so long. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to need someone to lean on. I ain't used to having someone to lean on. Not since Mama. Well, you've got me now. And your father. And Emma." Clara smiled. "And soon a baby brother or sister who's going to look up to you more than anyone else in the world." Something shifted in Sam's expression. The fear was still there, but something else too. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. "You think it'll be a boy or a girl?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. What do you want?" Sam considered. "A brother would be nice. I could teach him to fish, to ride, to rope cattle." He paused. "But a sister would be okay too, I guess. Long as she's not as annoying as Emma." Clara laughed. "I'll see what I can do." They sat together in the quiet barn, the weight of grief slowly lifting. "Clara, yeah. I'm glad you came here. I'm glad Pa sent for you." Sam's voice was barely above a whisper. "I know I was awful to you at first. Said things I shouldn't have. But I didn't mean any of it. Not really. I know you didn't. I was just so scared. Scared of forgetting Mama. Scared of loving someone new and losing them too." He looked at her, his eyes bright. "But I ain't scared anymore. Not of you." Clara pulled him into another hug. "That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. Don't tell Pa. He'll get jealous." Clara laughed through her tears. "Your secret's safe with me." The months that followed were the fullest of Clara's life. Summer faded into autumn. The leaves turned gold and red, then fell to carpet the ground. Clara's belly grew round beneath her dresses, and Emma took to talking to it every night before bed. "Hello, baby," she would whisper, her small hands pressed against Clara's stomach. "It's your big sister Emma. I can't wait to meet you. I'm going to teach you everything I know." Sam pretended to be too mature for such things, But Clara caught him more than once, standing in the doorway, watching with a soft expression on his face. Jacob was the most attentive husband Clara could have imagined. He insisted on doing all the heavy lifting, brought her pillows when her back ached, held her hair when the morning sickness got bad. At night, he would lie beside her with his hand on her belly, feeling for kicks. "This one's strong," he said one evening, laughing, as the baby landed a particularly fierce blow. "Takes after his mother." "Or her mother?" Clara corrected. "Either way, strong and stubborn, just like you." "I prefer determined." "I know you do." Jacob kissed her forehead. "And I love you for it." Virginia's trial came in October. Clara didn't attend. Doc Harrison had advised against the stress, but Ruth brought reports every day. She tried to blame everything on Crenshaw, Ruth said, settling into her usual chair. Said he manipulated her, preyed on her grief over her sister. Judge didn't buy it. What's the verdict? 5 years in prison for conspiracy and fraud. Would have been more, but her lawyer argued diminished capacity. Ruth shook her head. Said losing her sister all those years ago damaged her mind. "Do you believe that?" "I believe Virginia's been damaged for a long time, but I also believe we're all responsible for our choices." Ruth met Clara's eyes. She chose hatred. She chose revenge. And now she's paying the price. Clara touched her belly where the baby was doing somersaults. "I almost feel sorry for her." "That's because you're a good person. Better than most." Ruth smiled. "But don't waste too much pity on Virginia Ashford. She made her bed. Now she's lying in it." The baby came on a bitter January night. Clara woke with pains tearing through her belly, and for one terrifying moment, she was transported back to all the stories she'd heard about Margaret. The bleeding, the complications, the death that came too fast. "Jacob." He was awake instantly on his feet, before his eyes were fully open. "Is it time?" "I think so. I think—" Another contraction seized her, stealing her breath. "Zeke!" Jacob shouted, running for the door. "Zeke, ride to town! Get Doc Harrison!" The next hours blurred into a haze of pain and fear. Ruth arrived first, having somehow sensed something was happening. She took charge immediately, boiling water, preparing clean linens, holding Clara's hand through the worst contractions. "You're doing beautifully," Ruth said. "Just breathe. The doctor's coming." "I'm scared," Clara gasped. "Ruth, I'm so scared." "I know, honey, but you're the bravest woman I know. You can do this." Doc Harrison arrived an hour later, his face grim as he examined Clara. "Baby's coming fast, faster than I expected." He rolled up his sleeves. "Mrs. McAllister, I need you to push when I tell you. Can you do that?" Yes, I can do it." Jacob appeared in the doorway, his face white. "Jacob, you shouldn't—" Ruth started. "I'm not leaving her." He crossed to Clara's side, took her hand. "I wasn't there for Margaret. I'm not making that mistake again." Clara gripped his hand like a lifeline. "I love you," she breathed. "I love you too. Now push." The pain was unlike anything Clara had ever experienced. It consumed her, became her, burned through every nerve until she was nothing but agony and determination. "Push," Doc Harrison commanded. She pushed. Again. She pushed again. "One more time, Mrs. McAllister. I can see the head." Clara screamed a sound torn from somewhere primal and pushed with everything she had left. And then suddenly, miraculously, there was crying. "It's a girl," Doc Harrison announced. "A healthy baby girl." Clara collapsed against the pillows, sobbing with relief. "A girl," Jacob whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Clara, we have a daughter." Doc Harrison placed the squalling infant in Clara's arms. She was tiny and red and absolutely perfect. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered, touching the baby's cheek. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby opened her eyes, bright blue like Clara's own, and stopped crying. She stared up at her mother with an expression of pure wonder. "She knows you." Jacob said, his voice thick. She knows her mama. Of course she does. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. We've been talking for months. The door creaked open. Sam and Emma stood in the hallway, their faces anxious. Can we come in? Emma asked. Please. Clara smiled. Come meet your sister. The children crept forward, their eyes wide. She's so small, Sam breathed. She's beautiful, Emma corrected. What's her name? Clara looked at Jacob. They'd discussed names for months, never quite settling on one. Margaret, Clara said softly. Margaret Rose McAllister. Jacob's breath caught. You want to name her after the woman who gave me this family, the woman who loved you first. Clara met his eyes. Is that okay? It's more than okay. Jacob's voice broke. It's perfect. Emma clapped her hands. I have a sister named Margaret, like Mama. Like Mama. Clara agreed. So she'll never be forgotten. Sam reached out his finger, brushing the baby's tiny hand. Hey, Margaret, he whispered. I'm your big brother Sam. I'm gonna take care of you, just like I take care of Emma. The baby's fingers curled around his. She likes you, Emma said. Course she does. Sam grinned a real full grin. I'm her favorite already. Clara laughed, exhausted and elated and overwhelmed with love for these children, all of them. Come here, she said. All of you. I want my whole family close. They gathered around the bed, Jacob on one side, Sam and Emma on the other, and looked down at the newest member of the McAllister family. We did it, Jacob said quietly. Clara, we really did it. We're not done yet. Clara smiled up at him. We're just getting started. Spring arrived gently that year. Margaret Rose McAllister grew stronger every day, her cries turning to coos, her eyes following her siblings wherever they went. Sam appointed himself her official protector. Emma sang to her constantly, the old hymns Ruth had taught her, the songs about rivers that Margaret's mother used to sing. On a warm evening in April, Clara sat on the porch with the baby in her arms while Jacob finished the evening chores. Sam was helping Zeke with the horses. Emma was inside, supposedly doing her lessons, but more likely drawing pictures of butterflies. Ruth's wagon appeared on the road. Evening, Ruth called, climbing down with a basket. Brought you some of that apple cake you like. Ruth, you spoil us. Someone has to. Ruth settled into the chair beside Clara, peering at the baby. Lord, she gets more beautiful every day. Looks just like you. Jacob says she has his stubbornness. Well, she's got to get something from her daddy. Ruth chuckled. How are you feeling, really? Clara considered the question. A year ago, she'd been a desperate orphan with nothing but a carpet bag and a fading hope. Now, she was a wife, a mother, part of a family she had helped build from broken pieces. I feel like the luckiest woman alive, Clara said honestly. Good, because you've earned every bit of that luck. Ruth reached over, squeezed Clara's hand. I'm proud of you, honey. Margaret would be too. Which Margaret? Both of them. Ruth smiled. The one who raised you and the one who came before. They're both watching over you, I'm sure of it. Clara looked down at her daughter, Margaret Rose, named for love and loss and hope. I like to think so too. Jacob appeared from the barn, his face lighting up when he saw Ruth. Evening, Mrs. Caldwell. You staying for supper? Wouldn't miss it. Good. Sam caught some fish today, enough to feed an army. They went inside as a family, Clara and the baby Jacob with his arm around his wife Ruth, following with her basket, Sam and Emma tumbling in from their various activities. The kitchen filled with noise and laughter. Zeke joined them, trading stories with Ruth about the old days. Sam argued with Emma about who got the biggest piece of fish. Jacob bounced Margaret on his knee, while Clara served the food she'd learned to make over the past year. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was home. After supper, when Ruth had gone, and the children were in bed, and Margaret was sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Clara and Jacob stood on the porch together. Remember the first night I was here? Clara asked. You told me about Virginia, about Crenshaw, warned me that things were going to get hard. I remember. I was terrified, convinced I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Clara leaned against him. I never imagined it would turn out like this. Neither did I. Jacob pressed a kiss to her hair. When I sent that advertisement to the Eastern papers, I was just looking for help. Someone to keep the house running, watch the children. I never expected to fall in love, to find a partner. A true partner. He turned her to face him. Clara, you saved us. You saved this ranch, you saved my children, and you saved me. I was drowning in grief and guilt, and you pulled me back to the surface. You saved me too. You gave me a home when I had nothing, a family when I was alone. Clara's eyes glistened. We saved each other, Jacob. That's how it works. He kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise. I love you, Clara McAllister. I love you too. They stood together watching the stars emerge, the night settling soft around them. Somewhere in the house, the baby stirred and cried. Emma's voice drifted down, singing a lullaby. Sam's footsteps creaked on the floorboards above, checking on his sisters. This was Clara's life now. These were her people, and she wouldn't trade a single moment of it. Years later, people in Willow Creek would tell the story. They'd tell it to their children and their grandchildren, the tale of the mail-order bride who came to Wyoming with nothing but a carpetbag and 17 cents. Who faced down a scheming widow and a corrupt banker. Who saved a dying child and exposed a conspiracy and fell in love with a man everyone thought would never smile again. They'd tell how she raised 4 children on that ranch, Sam and Emma, little Margaret Rose, and eventually a son they named Thomas after Jacob's father. How she became the heart of the community, always first to help when trouble came, always ready with a kind word or a warm meal. They'd tell how Jacob McAllister lived to be an old man with a white beard and a belly laugh, surrounded by grandchildren who begged him for stories about the early days. How he never stopped looking at his wife, like she'd hung the moon, even after 50 years of marriage. And they'd tell how Clara McAllister never forgot where she came from, never forgot the scared girl who stepped off that stagecoach into a stranger's life, hoping for survival and finding so much more. On her 85th birthday, surrounded by 4 generations of family, Clara was asked for her secret. How did you do it? Her great-granddaughter asked. How did you build all this from nothing? Clara smiled the same smile that had captured Jacob's heart all those years ago. I didn't build it from nothing, she said. I built it from love, from hope, from the stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed impossible. But weren't you scared? Every day. Clara reached out, took the young woman's hand. But fear isn't the opposite of courage. Fear is the companion of courage. You can't be brave without being scared first. And the love. How did you know it was real? Clara thought about Jacob, her Jacob who had passed peacefully in his sleep 2 years ago, his hand still reaching for hers, who had loved her truly and completely for more than 6 decades. Real love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, she said. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, even when you're tired or scared or uncertain. It's about choosing each other over and over again for the rest of your lives. That sounds hard. It is hard, but it's worth it. Clara squeezed her great-granddaughter's hand. The best things in life always are. That night, Clara sat by her window, looking out at the ranch that had been her home for 67 years. The land had changed, new buildings, new fences, new generations, working soil that her hands had helped cultivate. But the heart of it remained. The love she and Jacob had planted here had grown roots deeper than any tree branches, wider than any river. She closed her eyes and felt him near. Felt her mother and Jacob's mother and Margaret, who had come before. All the people she had loved and lost and carried with her through the long, beautiful journey of her life. I did good, didn't I? She whispered to the stars. I took the hand I was dealt, and I made something beautiful. The wind stirred. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. And Clara McAllister smiled, knowing in her bones that the answer was yes. She had come to Wyoming as a stranger with nothing but hope. She was leaving as a legend, surrounded by love. And that made all the difference. Because sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single step into the unknown. Sometimes the deepest love grows from the most unlikely soil. And sometimes a girl who believed she was destined for nothing more than survival discovers that she was built for so much more. Clara Ann Whitmore McAllister had proven that truth with every breath of her remarkable life, and her story would echo through generations, a testament to the power of courage, the resilience of hope, and the unbreakable strength of a heart that refuses to stop believing in love.